On today's episode, Hadi Kalakeche from Locked On NHL Prospects joins the show to discuss who the Blackhawks should take at number 2 and some other thoughts on a few prospects already in the Blackhawks pipelines.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just a quick reminder to everyone who's watching this on YouTube right now to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much. If you're tuning in through a audio platform, make sure you're constantly downloading all of those latest episodes. You can rate and review the show as well. And last but certainly not least, got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. All right, joining me on the show now is none other than Hadi Kalakeche from Locked On NHL Prospects and Dobber Prospects to discuss who should the Blackhawks take with the second overall selection. He'll also share some input on the 2024 draft class as a whole and share some thoughts on a few players already in the Blackhawks pipelines. Hadi, this has been a conversation I've been looking forward to for a long time since you last came on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time. How's the busy offseason treating you, my friend?
There's no off season when you're scouting. It's really busy. But listen, CHL playoffs are coming to an end. Basically, all I have left to scout is the Memorial Cup, which I'm excited for. U18 Worlds was eye-opening, though. That was a really great tournament. Canada, USA in the finals, all that good stuff. It was great hockey.
Absolutely. Well, excited to be talking about a lot of intriguing players for this year's NHL draft. Obviously, we know the results of the NHL draft lottery, and the Chicago Blackhawks have the second overall pick. Some fans might be disappointed that, Macklin Celebrini, very likely, barring something completely unforeseen, is not going to be joining Connor Bedard in the future of the Chicago Blackhawks. However, Hadi, one point I've really been trying to get across to my viewers, my listeners, and my fan base is that this is still a really big win for the Blackhawks. It might not be that grand slam walk-off home run or a double overtime winner to go and get the W, but it's a pretty massive victory all in all for the Chicago Blackhawks, even though they're not getting Macklin Celebrini.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, Celebrini would have been fantastic. And, in a draft class like this, when you have a crown jewel like that at the top end of the draft, you think, oh, anything less than that's a loss, but anything at 2 is a win, really. I mean, there's a big glut of players to choose from with 2 kind of principal names at the top. That's up for a debate. Some people are higher or lower on Levshunov, but what's for sure is at 2. I mean, you've got so many options, so many routes, and Chicago could use some help in any position, really. So it's not like they're targeting anything specific, but yeah, there's just a wide range of options you can go for here too, and all of them are quite good, honestly.
We'll get into the Ivan Demidov, Artyom Levshunov debate here in just a moment. But Hadi, first, I am curious to hear kind of your thoughts on this 2024 draft class as a whole, because last year it was obviously a class that was talked about and super gassed up. What do you think about this kind of class as a whole compared to maybe some others in the years past?
Yeah, I mean, heading into it, I feel like there's a consensus that this was going to be a defenseman's draft, and that after kind of the 10 range, there was kind of a big drop off. I feel like that conversation's died off a bit because of how many forwards and other defensemen that we didn't expect had so many amazing seasons. Levshunov took a step off to step up. Demidov took a step up. That we kind of expected, but there's a bunch of guys who joined the race that no one expected. Anton Salayev, Cayden Lindstrom. Berkeley Catton was already being talked about, but Lindstrom, Tisha Gilna becoming a bona fide top 10 prospect. Like, there was a big influx of talent that's making this class look really, really good. Now with 8-9 months of draft eligible tape behind our belts. So it's looking really, really good. Better than it did at the start of the year. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think some people also, just because of how good last class was, maybe just got a sense that this was going to be an underwhelming year for the NHL draft. But when taking a look at some of these prospects projected to go in the top 5 and the top 10, and you mentioned the ascension that some of these guys had in their draft year, I really do think this is a very captivating top of the draft class. And like I said, I really think with all that ascension that players have had, puts the Blackhawks in a really good spot here at number 2. But those two names that have been kind of mentioned the most with the number 2 overall selection have been Ivan Demidov and Artyom Levshunov. As you said, there are some other guys that could be in the conversation. We're actually going to get into that during segment 2. But between these two players, Demidov, Levshunov, tell me what you like a little bit about each of them. And if you were Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson, which way would you be leaning? And it's curious because, as you referenced as well, Hadi, the Blackhawks need a lot of different things. They could use another top 6 winger. They could use a right-handed defenseman, which is why I think Levshunov is intriguing. So kind of break this little one-on-one down for me, if you will.
It's a no-brainer. It's Ivan Demidov all day, every day, 24/7. You run to the stage, you pick him, you leave. That's it. You've got a fantastic player. For me personally, if you ask me, Ivan Demidov is better than Matvei Michkov, and that's been a debate all year. It's something that's really contentious. If you ask Flyers fans, they'll rip your head off about it. But I mean, listen, he's the only prospect in our in our rankings that we gave a 10 grade for a specific tool, and that's his stick handling ability. He has the best handling skill I've seen. I mean, it's not just the handling skill in isolation, it's the creativity. He just comes up with solutions no one can expect. For me, he's the closest thing to Pavel Datsyuk we've seen since Pavel Datsyuk. Like, he's that good at just completely mystifying defensemen, getting around them, stick handling through them. And again, just finding solutions consistently. Sometimes you feel like, okay, he's on his knees, the puck's on the edge of his stick, he's about to lose it. He gets up, he puts it through a defenseman's legs, and he's out. He's just so wriggly, so elusive. And on top of that, fantastic shot. Great effort level, honestly. His motor's going underrated because of how skillful he is. But he puts in work defensively, puts in work on the forecheck. He's always, pedal to the metal, kind of creating things through pace, through dynamicism. So even though his skating mechanics are weird, the output is amazing. So, for me, it's a no-brainer there. But if the Hawks go for Artyom Levshunov, that's really good as well. I mean, he's for me a top 3 defenseman in this draft. I like Zayne Parekh a bit more, Zeev Buium a bit more, because of the upside that they bring and the composure that they bring. I think that's the main thing with me with Levshunov is I've always had a bit of concerns with the composure. But you got to keep in mind, this is a prospect who was playing in the U18 Belarusian League 2 years ago. That's not a level that makes you think. That's not a level that gets your brain going. It's chaotic hockey. So spending a year in the USHL and then being kind of a last minute commitment to Michigan State in the SNAA and performing the way he did, I mean, he was one of the main reasons that Michigan State was the top 5 team in the nation in the NCAA. So there's a lot to love here in either direction, but for me, there's a gap in skill and there's a gap in projectability between Demidov and Levshunov. That's why I lean Demidov.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. And Artyom Levshunov would absolutely address a need for the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think if they do wind up picking him, I don't think fans should be upset that they took him over Demidov because it is still a plug for one of their needs in the organization. But to me, when thinking about the upside possible with Demidov and pairing him with Connor Bedard, having that right and left-hand shot, like, I just think you can't turn down that upside. And Hadi, when I've watched Demidov, it's like you spoke about the creativity. He tries things that make you wonder, like, what was he trying to do out there? But he pulls it off because he's got that confidence, he's got that belief, and he just has that skill. He's willing to try things that I don't think other players will, and he believes he can pull them off because he's just that talented. And it reminds me a little bit of Connor Bedard. Like, I feel like he never takes the easy route into goals or to passing plays. Like, he's dancing through guys, he's cutting by them, right? And it's just a highlight reel after highlight reel. And I just think that potential with Demidov and Bedard, I feel the exact same way. Music to my ears. I think he has to be the pick at number 2 from my perspective. But like I said, there are a lot of intriguing options here, Artyom Levshunov being one of them. We'll talk more in just a second about some of the other players that could possibly be in contention for the Blackhawks at number 2. But here, real quick, Blackhawks fans, got to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel, because it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball season is also in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. And right now, new customers can get $150 worth of bonus bets guaranteed. Yes, you heard me right. $150 win or lose. And you can use these bonuses to bet on everything from slap shots throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs to home runs across all the great American ballparks and even slam dunks on the way to the NBA championship, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Go and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, segment 2, Hadi. We just talked about Ivan Demidov, Artyom Levshunov, probably the two main horses in that race for the Blackhawks at number 2. But as we talked about, there are a lot of other enticing names here at the top of the board. It's going to be really curious to see what order they all sort themselves out at, because it is really wide open after Macklin Celebrini goes number 1. But Cayden Lindstrom is someone who I actually just broke down on my show today. Cole Yzerman's name, I know his stock has fallen a little bit here, but 1 year ago, he was probably the guy most people were thinking was going to compete with Macklin Celebrini for that number 1 overall pick. So, Hadi, do you think there are any other players in the conversation for the Blackhawks at number 2? And if so, who do you think they are?
100%. I think Zayne Parekh would be the best option. Parekh, in terms of upside, he's the one defenseman in this draft that I think could reach a point per game. Like what's so impressive with the way that he creates offense is that everything he does, you could plug him in the NHL right now offensively. If you just put him on a power play, he'll get you points. Like, he can work with better players. The way that he creates offense is so translatable that if hockey was just the power play, he's NHL ready. The issue with Parekh is that there's concerns around his defense. I think they're a bit overblown. I mean, I've heard some people call his defense abysmal. I wouldn't go that far. He's able to get his stick in the right lanes. He's able to make the right plays. He's defensively aware. He's just physically limited. So, when it comes to shrugging off bigger players, he struggles with that. When it comes to winning board battles, he struggles with that. He has this tendency to just kind of bear hug guys along the boards and just hope and pray that the puck goes to a teammate. It's stuff like that you can work on. It's the habits, it's the physicality, but the awareness is there. He understands defense. It's just a matter of applying it, being more consistent with his effort level. But the offense is off the chart. He's got a ridiculous shot. He's got, for me, probably the best shot among defensemen in this draft. Wrister, snapper, slap shot. He can go to the backhand, top shelf, like you name it. He's got a ridiculous skill set. He's got amazing hands and the best vision of the defenseman in this class. So there's so much to love offensively. If you're looking for a top power play quarterback and you're willing to live with a bit of shortcomings defensively, maybe pair him with a guy that's a bit more defensively reliable. I know you guys have Alex Vlasic, who's kind of in that mold heading into the future. You've got a couple pieces in the pool among left-handed Ds that could pair well with him. So for me, it's just Parekh is the guy. If it's not Parekh, then you're probably looking at a forward. But I don't know where Cayden Lindstrom would fit in this future Blackhawks roster with Oliver Moore, Frank Nazar, who can all play down the middle. I don't know about going center with the second overall pick, but for me, it's Demidov, Parekh, and Levshunov is kind of the trio I'd be looking for if I'm the Blackhawks.
So I'm curious, do you see Cayden Lindstrom as a center, as an NHLer? You see him down the middle more so than a wing?
I mean, he could play the wing. He's got the skill set for it. The thing is, you're going to have to wait a while. So it's going to be 3-4 years before he sees some NHL ice time. Because he's pretty raw. He's really, really skillful, physically dominant. He's a pest. He's a great person off the ice. There's so much love there. Like, he's in my personal top 3, or top 4 rather. But the thing is, after those 4 or 5 years, where's Oliver Moore? Where's Connor Bedard? Where's Frank Nazar? And after playing 3-4 years at center, with Medicine Hat or whichever other team he gets traded to in the WHL, because these guys move all the time. What for me, the question is, can you move him to the wing and make him as effective as he is at center after 3-4 years of experience of developing his game, developing his habits, developing his decision-making around being a center? And how much of a hit will his upside take due to not playing in the position he's comfortable with and not playing in a position that's usually more lucrative? If you're trading a piece, trading a center costs more in terms of picks and prospects and all that than trading a winger, right? So it's just a matter of how you evaluate that. But he could play the wing. He'd be a really good left winger, but The question is, after spending 3-4 years at center, it's kind of a shame to then just move him to the wing at the NHL level, right? So that's my reasoning for it.
For sure. The only reason I ask is because I feel like this has been a need in the Blackhawks organization, really since Jonathan Toews kind of had that decline. And when they first traded the good Brandon Saad, they've kind of just missed having some size and skill really in their top six. And that's why, looking back to 2019, I know things didn't work out well, but I was okay with the Kirby Dach pick because I thought it addressed an area that they needed because they've just had a lot of small forwards on this roster for quite some time. I mean, Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat, Max Domi, to now Connor Bedard, Philip Kurashev, right? Frank Nazar doesn't have much size. Oliver Moore's not the biggest kid in the world. So that's why Cayden Lindstrom was a little bit intriguing to me just because of his size and skill. And that's an area the Blackhawks have been missing. But that's why I bring you on to answer these questions. You would know far better than I would about his development and what would fit best for him moving forward. So just curious to ask about Cayden Lindstrom, but also Hadi, Blackhawks have a second first-round pick in this year's draft, number 20 overall from the Tampa Bay Lightning, stemming from that Brandon Hagel trade a couple of years ago. And I there's just so much fascination to me around what the Blackhawks are going to do in this year's draft, Hadi. Assuming they take Ivan Demidov at number 2, I still feel like with either number 20 or number 34, their first pick in the second round, they're probably going to want to be adding a right-hand defenseman. It's just something they really need in the organization. Are there any right-handed defensemen that you think could be available around number 20 for them to take? And on the flip side, sorry to do that to you. On the flip side, let's say they do take Levshunov at number 2. Which forwards at the back half of the draft would you be looking at for the Blackhawks?
For sure. So that's a difficult. I would say in terms of right-handed Ds that would be available around 20. There's 2 I'm looking for. First, Adam Juracek has been injured pretty much the whole year. He got injured at basically the first game of the World Juniors and then didn't come back. So if he's available at 20, I'd take a shout at him. He's really raw. He's really unrefined. But if you can get him up to par and get him playing consistent pro minutes, he'll be a really good player. He's violent. He's aggressive down low, but he's also got some soft skill. He's able to get off the boards, make a good breakout pass. He's able to transition the puck, join the rush. He's got good skating, really, really good skating. So he's a player I'd be looking for in terms of right-handed Ds at 20. Another one that I don't see really talked about that much is Dominik Badinka. He's been playing all year with, he's a big right-handed defenseman, 6'2", 195 pounds. He's been playing with in the SHL all year in the Swedish Hockey League. Against men, against basically in the second best pro league in the world, and doing really good stuff. It's been inconsistent. His ice time went up and went down, but at some point he was playing 20 minutes a night in the pro league. You can't knock that. That's a lot. Right. And there's a lot of value there too. A really smooth skating defensive defenseman. He's physical. He's able to close gaps really well. A great rush defender. So those are the 2 guys I'm looking for in terms of right-handed Ds. If they go Levshunov with their first pick, it gets a bit complicated after that because, I mean, if I'm the Hawks at 20th overall, I'm probably still swinging for at least a bit of upside. So I'd steer clear of kind of the contenders picks, the Linus Erikssons, the Cole Baudouins, these kind of like these big physical projectable centers that don't really project more than kind of a really, really good third line center. In terms of upside, it's a bit difficult, but I'd say probably a guy like Miguel Marquez would be really interesting. Michael Hage would be a fantastic pickup if they can pick him up. There's a couple guys there. I mean, Michael Hage plays for the Chicago Steel. It's right in their alley. Like, he's a guy I'd be looking at. But what's for sure is if by 34 Cole Baudouin is there, he'd be a fantastic pickup for Chicago, just because you've got your top 2 centers probably locked up among more Bedard and Nazar. You've probably got 2 centers in there in your top 6. Adding Baudouin as one of the best third line centers potentially in the NHL would be fantastic.
We'll get to Frank Nazar and Oliver Moore here in just a second, but the last question I have for you, Hadi, on the 2024 NHL draft is, out of the big name guys maybe projected to go in that top 10, which one of them could you see sliding potentially? And then maybe someone who's not being talked about a bunch, who could you see kind of rising in the first round of this year's draft?
So I think Berkeley Catton slides. He's not on a lot of teams' radars and favorably. I mean, teams have watched him all year, but there's some questions. Really, really skillful, really dynamic, one of the best transition creators in the draft, but there's concerns around his defensive game, his lack of size, all that. These guys slip all the time. Zach Benson slipped last year. I wouldn't put it past Berkeley Catton to fall to like 15. In terms of guys that could rise up, I'm not a fan of Anton Slayev, and I know for a fact he's getting picked top 5. He's a 6'7" left-handed defenseman who closes gaps like it's ridiculous. Guys that big should not skate that well. But have big concerns about his decision making, his lack of composure. He doesn't really respond well to pressure. So he's a guy I would say is going to slip up compared to where I have him. But in terms of where consensus has players, TJ Gillen right now is around 9. I could see him get picked as high as 5 to Montreal. Like, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Trevor Connolly could go anywhere from 5th to 45th. Like, it's ridiculous. He could go anywhere. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of moving parts, but I'd say those are the guys I would point out. Yeah.
It's going to be such an intriguing draft because after Macklin hears his name called at number 1, I don't think anyone has any idea what's really going to happen, but that's what makes it so exciting. Looking forward to the end of June. Hadi, before I let you go, one more segment coming up in just a moment. We'll talk about some prospects who are already in the Blackhawks organization. But first, I got to talk to you all about Policygenius. With Policygenius, you can go and find life insurance policies that start at $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. And some options even offer same-day approvals and also help avoid unnecessary medical exams. And Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace that helps you save both time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting right here today. Go and talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the entire process step by step along your side, comparing quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to get you the best and lowest price. And Policygenius is a trustworthy marketplace with thousands of 5-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. So go and check life insurance off of your to-do list right now with Policygenius. Head on over to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL, or you can also simply go and click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes today and see how much you could be saving. Again, that's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. All right, back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just a quick reminder to everyone watching on YouTube to like, comment, subscribe, and to also go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On and our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Hadi, when we last talked, we spoke about a few Blackhawks prospects already in the organization. Some of your thoughts on these players. I thought since we are now wrapped up with the end of the year, we can kind of go back and touch base on some of those guys and see how you're kind of feeling as we're now a couple of months removed from that. And the first guy I got to talk to you about is someone I know you beloved going into the 2022 NHL draft, man who went 13th overall. You said you could have had him as high as number 2, I believe, if I remember that correctly. It's Frank Nazar, who made his NHL debut at the end of the year. Unfortunately, his Frozen Four championship dreams didn't go the way that he planned, but he got an opportunity to kick down the doors of the NHL, make his debut with the Blackhawks, scores on his first shot on goal, and just flash in the upside that's had me excited for a couple of years about Frank Nazar. I know you've been excited about him as well. Talk to me what you love about his game so much and where you kind of see him thriving in the Blackhawks forward group in the future.
Yeah, so for me, Frank Nazar is a player who I think could complement Connor Bedard very, very well. He's also a player who I think could man a second line as kind of the primary play driver on that line really well. So you've got a combination of centers there in Bedard and Nazar that can work well together, can work well apart. I think it's a great foundation for the future. Nazar is a cut inside at all costs type player. He will find a way, regardless of what you put in front of him, to cut across defenders, cut to the middle of the ice where the shots are most dangerous, where he can draw players from both directions, open up ice on both directions. That's what makes him a really good center, in my opinion, is that gravitational pull he has to him. When he gets going, when he gets stick handling, he draws defenders into him. He draws sticks into him, frees up space, frees up lanes. I think it's an amazing part of his game that I've loved since the start. It's only gotten better as he's developed with University of Michigan. Playing with Gavin Brindley consistently with Michigan has been really, really good for his game, because Brindley is he's this undersized buzzsaw two-way forward, which has allowed Nazar to kind of get used to a player who plays at an NHL pace, because Brindley certainly does. So I don't think he's going to have any trouble keeping up mentally with teammates that skate fast, that skate hard, that put in a lot of work, put in a lot of effort. He's been playing with a player like that since basically he joined Michigan. So I'm a big fan of his game. I was really excited to see that he scored on his first shot. I tuned in for that game, and
Let's go.
yeah, it was fantastic to watch. He's still, I mean, obviously it's his first NHL game. There's going to be warts and hiccups and that kind of stuff, but I don't think Nazar gets enough love for how much effort he puts into every shift. He's a dog on a bone. And once he gets used to the NHL pace, that's going to be clearer and clearer and clearer. And Blackhawks fans are going to love this guy for a decade.
I'm super excited about Frank Nazar, hoping he has a really big camp next fall and can make the NHL roster right out of the gate. Another center in the Blackhawks organization who has a super high ceiling because of his wheels, his offensive ability, as well as Oliver Moore, who's a year younger than Frank Nazar, just spent his freshman year with the University of Minnesota. I guess my question for you, Hadi, is after his draft year and his first year following that, how would you kind of assess the development or the growth in Oliver Moore's game as he's trying to take these next steps?
So Moore's kind of start to the season was a bit rocky. It took him some time to get up to speed. I think he scored like 25 of his 33 points in the last like 20 to 25 games of the season. Like, it took him some time to get up to speed, to get used to the pace with the University of Minnesota. But once he got up to that pace, once he was able to keep up with play, and once he was driving his line, you really saw what he's capable of. Again, Moore is just speed incarnate. He's the best skater out of the 2023 NHL Draft. I was really excited to see that Chicago picked him up, because we're talking about a prospect who he's a player I think was closer to Will Smith than people think in terms of upside, even though he was playing behind him in the roster. I think that Moore has so much to give to the game, and he was always going to have a slower development curve. So this is not really a surprise for me. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that that he was able to kind of flirt with a point per game, 33 points in 39 games this season. I expected him to be around half a point a game in his first season in the NCAA, and then next season kind of pop off. But this is exciting news. I think this is great for Moore's development.
And I feel like a guy who's kind of on a similar trajectory path, maybe even a little bit longer, is Sam Rinzel, who was his teammate at the University of Minnesota this past season as well, was part of the 2022 draft class, but one of the youngest players that year. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts of Sam Rinzel's potential as an NHL player, because outside of Seth Jones, Sam Rinzel's the only right-handed defenseman the Blackhawks have long-term plans for in the entire organization, right? And that's why it's such a need going into this year's draft. But as a result of that, I've had a lot of people asking me, what's Sam Rinzel's potential? What's his ceiling? And he still feels like he's a little bit raw too. So it's a little bit hard for me to project. So I'm just curious your thoughts on Sam Rinzel, his development, and what kind of player he could be for the Blackhawks.
Yeah, so I mean, the one word that comes to mind with Rinzel is steadiness. Even though the decision making is kind of hit or miss, and sometimes he doesn't really make the right decision for the right circumstances in game, I still think that when he keeps the play in front of him, when he's off the puck, when he's defending the rush, he's among the best in the NCAA at that specifically. I don't see much offense with Rinzel. The shot isn't really anything to write home about. The playmaking ability, I mean, a lot of his points were secondary assists where he kind of bombed a puck up the ice, dumped it out into the neutral zone, and then Minnesota took it from there. So I don't see him as necessarily an offensive play driver or necessarily a two-way, like a bona fide two-way defenseman. I see him as a defense-first defenseman who's probably going to be playing on the penalty kill, either the first or second unit, and who's going to log a bunch of minutes. He's going to get you 20 minutes a night at least, and he's going to be reliable. He's going to, in my opinion, I think Rinzel is a second-pair defenseman at his best if everything works out right. The question is whether he's a number 3, so the kind of primary piece on that second pair, or number 4, so kind of the complementary piece on that second pair. I think that's where the concern lies for me, is that I think he's more on the number 4 side, which is why I wouldn't be impartial to Chicago adding a right-handed D and Levshunov at second. Like, I understand the argument for it, because Levshunov for me is just like, I can see a bona fide number 2 defenseman there, but with Rinzel, it's like the upside's kind of limited, but he's still fairly promising for a player that was picked up where he was. He's going to take some time. Maybe he shows more in the next few years, but as he stands right now, I see a number 4 in the future.
Last prospect I wanted to ask you about, Hadi, is Ryan Greene, who spent the last 2 years playing for Boston University, one of the most prestigious programs in all of the country, was utilized as their second line center this past season behind Macklin Celebrini, but has had a really productive first 2 years as an underclassman in college hockey. He is officially going back to Boston University for his junior year. I think it's a really good situation for him to kind of be the guy, maybe someone wearing a letter in that locker room potentially next year. Talk to me a little bit about Ryan Greene, because he's always been someone I've been fascinated by. Just seeing him whenever, people are following Macklin and he's on TV and you're seeing highlights. He's always someone that's popped out to me. So I'm curious your thoughts on him as well.
Yeah, he's really good. I love the pace in this game. He's really slippery and elusive, but he's also got that high speed, that ability to break lines and transition. Um, I've grown a bit higher on his defensive game. It was a bit of a concern in this draft year. I've gone a bit more confident with his projection defensively. Puts a stick in the right lanes. Has gotten more proactive rather than reactive, which is something I like to see in young centers, especially developing in the NCAA, because that's the tough thing is predicting play in the NCAA. It's kind of chaotic hockey as well, even though there's more structure than obviously the USHL and all that. But I've been, he's a player that'll excite you. He's got skill, he's got pace, he's able to get inside, he's able to get shots from dangerous areas. I've liked his shot so far in the NCAA. And yeah, I think that next season is a great opportunity for him to take the reins of this Boston University team, potentially become their first line center, their bona fide 1C, and kind of run from there.
All right, Hadi. Well, thank you very much for all of your insight and your time. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I know all of my viewers and my listeners do as well. Hadi, why don't you go let everybody know where to check you out and your show out more? Because, listen, I am not the prospect expert. I just go out there and I try to tell the people what I see, but you're someone with some good insight behind it. So let the folks know where they can check you out leading up to this year's draft.
Absolutely. So wherever you're listening to this, just look up Locked On NHL Prospects and you'll find us. It's Sebastian and I. We're both directors of scouting at Dobber Prospects. We handle the prospect stuff. And you can also find me at the draft. I'll be there this June, giving insights, news, information. If you want to keep up with what's going on at the draft, you can also follow me on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, my handle's right below my face. If you're listening, it's HadiK_scouting. That's HADIK_scouting.
Sounds like you got a nice end of your June coming up, Hadi. Well, I hope you enjoy the 2024 NHL Draft, my friend. Thank you again for all your time. And yeah, everyone out there, definitely go tune into Locked On NHL Prospects to get some better insight than what I'll give you leading up to this year's NHL Draft.